You know what? Fuck it! Welcome to part 13 of Let's Play Pokémon FireRed, and I said that this would be a really long and boring part, but I didn't feel like doing that, so Silph Co is gonna be two different parts. This part is still gonna be pretty boring, but luckily it's not as incredibly long as it originally was after I did a little bit of editing. So the last two battles, which are actually significant battles as opposed to all the Team Rocket grunts we're gonna be fighting here, are gonna be shown in the next part. But anyway, welcome to the Silph Co building, which has been taken over by Team Rocket members. And believe me when I say, there are a lot of Team Rocket members. I'm not gonna show off every single one, but a number of them do still have Pokemon that we have yet to see in this playthrough, so those I'm gonna show off as always. And we got a TM for Torment, which makes it that the opponent you're using it on won't be able to use the same move twice in a row. But back on topic, as I said, this entire part is pretty much gonna be running around Silph Co and fighting Team Rocket grunts. You can also see these different sort of panels on the floor. These are teleporters. If you step on them, they will teleport you to a different teleporter. The teleporter is probably gonna be on a different floor of the Silph Co building where you were on first. I think there are about 10 or 11 floors of this entire building, so that's a lot. I'm also not gonna be using the teleporter because I wanna explore every nook and cranny for all the items there are to find in this building, as well as fighting all the Team Rocket members that I planned to show off. So I'm gonna have to make sure I check every single floor, so I'm just gonna be doing them in order. Floor 1, floor 2, the 3rd floor, the 4th floor, and so on and so forth. We're gonna see a few new Pokemon, like this one. This is Hypno, the evolution of Drowsy, still a psychic type, and it abducts children. And that's all I've got to say about that. Actually, since we're playing the remakes, we're actually gonna see that happen later on. But yeah, he steals children. It's in the Pokédex that he hypnotizes children and takes them away. Even in the Pokemon the anime, they sort of, I think they were supposedly making fun of it by having him hypnotize children so they thought they were Pokemon. Which is also why we now have a 30-minute YouTube loop of a girl thinking she is a Magikarp. Now what the fuck is a juggler doing here? Don't you hate that? You're going through a building that has been taken hostage, you're going around fighting people, and in the middle is this one guy just trying to impress people with his juggling. Happens all the time. Anyway, back to the Silph Co building. There are a few teleporters that you have to use in order to get to the very end, but those are pretty much the only ones I'm gonna be showing off because, well, I have to. All the other ones are optional and they get you around faster. But even that is only when you know which teleporter takes you to which floor to begin with. So, I repeat, I'm just gonna be doing all the floors in order, then go back to... I actually think it's the floor we're on right now and right next to the trainer we're fighting right now. I don't remember exactly, I could be wrong, we're gonna see it later in this video anyway. But before we can even get to that teleporter, you may have noticed all these grey walls. Those are doors that need a card key, and we can only get a card key by fighting a certain Team Rocket member somewhere in this building. After that we can open all those doors and get to the right teleporter. From that teleporter we can finish off the Silph Co building, and that's pretty much what we're gonna be doing throughout this video and the next part a little bit. Oh, and what we were fighting just now was a creepy motherfucker by the name of Mr. Mime. It is a psychic type and in Generation 6 becomes a psychic fairy type. I think I mentioned that Pokemon earlier when talking about gender. Its name is Mr. Mime, but it can be a female and still be called Mr. Mime. Its Japanese name probably doesn't have anything like Mr. or gender specific in its name. And it's a Generation 1 Pokemon when they didn't have any genders back then, so it is slightly forgiven, though I wish that the female one was called Mrs. Mime. And we now have a Magneton. It is the evolution of Magnemite, which you can see by the fact that it's clearly just 3 Magnemites glued together. But whatever. It evolves at level 30, so that person was another cheater. And finally it gets another evolution in Generation 4 by the name of Magnezone, a Pokemon that I'm actually quite fond of. But it only evolves in the Magnezone by leveling it up at a certain location. All 3 of the evolutions are electric steel type, so they are 4 times weak to ground type attacks. Which reminds me that I sort of need to correct myself, that I keep going back and forth between saying something is double weak to and something is 4 times weak to. I know it's a bit confusing when I keep going back and forth between those two things, but they do mean the same thing. When I say double weak to, it means that it has two types that are both weak to the same thing, and because one weakness already takes twice the damage, add those two together and you get 4 times. So my apologies for being a bit confusing on that matter. But with that out of the way, we still have a fairly boring part ahead of us, so I have a list in front of me, a list with a lot of information about Generation 1 that luckily is only in Generation 1. This list is mostly based on a list called The Problems with Generation 1, which you can probably find easy by typing it into Google. But that's not really necessary because I'm gonna be discussing them anyway. Along with some other stuff, this part is mostly changes between generations is what I'm gonna be talking about, while also talking about different Pokemon we meet during this part, like this one. This is Wheezing. Poison type, evolution of Coughing, and it went from being really happy as a Coughing to being really sad as a Wheezing. Probably because it has an equally sad tumor now. It's an okay Pokemon, still has the ability Levitate, so you can hit it with a ground type move. And that's about it. We're gonna meet other new Pokemon along the way as we go through the Silph Co building, but in the meantime, time for some Generation 1 trivia. These are mostly gonna be glitches, either glitches or something that was just really unbalanced but still deliberate, but still has a really good reason they changed it in other generations. So let's get moving. First off is critical hits. As I've explained before, critical hit is just a small random chance of doing more damage than usual. In Generation 1, critical hits were based off of speed instead of just being a random factor, meaning if you have a really fast Pokemon, you're gonna get a lot of critical hits. Jolteon, for example, the electric type evolution of Eevee, it has a really high speed stat. I think it's the second fastest Pokemon in Generation 1, along with a few others. But because of this, it has a really high critical hit chance. It's like 25% chance it will score a critical hit, which is a 1 in 4 chance every time it uses an attack. It's exploitable, really exploitable, and so is also just kind of overpowered in a way. So it was changed, and now it goes for every single Pokemon that there's a 6.25% chance or a 1 in 16th chance. That is the standard, so not using any focus energy or critical hit increased moves. This one wasn't really a glitch, just a different way of programming it that kind of needed to be changed. But the next one is a glitch, and it's related to whenever you hit a Pokemon with a super effective move, it will give you a message saying it's super effective or it's not very effective if you're using a not very effective move. In Generation 1, that message display was glitched. Dealing the super effective or not very effective damage was still the same, just the thing telling you didn't work right. This was only the case with Pokemon that had dual typing, so that had two different types, because that message would only calculate for the second type a Pokemon has. For example, I'm using a fighting type move on a normal flying type. Normal is weak to fighting, while flying is resistant to fighting. The attack itself is just gonna do normal damage because those two balance each other out. However, the display message would only calculate for the second typing being flying, so it will say it's not very effective even though it was just normal damage. And it also works the same way the other way around. If I'm fighting a water ice type and I'm using a fire type move, it will say it's super effective. However, water is resistant to fire, so it would do neutral damage, but it just wouldn't tell me it did neutral damage. The calculation of the attack is still the same. But I'm gonna interrupt myself for a moment here, because the Pokemon we are about to kill is Electrode. Still an electric type, it's the evolution of Voltorb, and it is the fastest Generation 1 Pokemon there is. In fact, I think it's still one of the fastest Pokemon to this day. I think the only Pokemon that is faster is Ninjask, and the Pokemon Deoxys, which is an event legendary, and even that one can potentially be slower, but that's because it has different forms. But Electrode being so fast relates to all Generation 1 Pokemon having their critical hits calculated by speed. Electrode is the most abusable with that. For every attack is a 27% chance of dealing a critical hit, which is slightly higher than Jolteon. But let's move on to other reasons why Generation 1 was unbalanced. The sleep status effect. In later generations, the moment you wake up, you're immediately allowed to use the move that you selected. In Generation 1, however, waking up in and of itself would take up a turn. So you would wake up from the sleep status, and then the next turn you would be allowed to use a move, However, this also means that if your opponent is faster, he can immediately put you back to sleep. Now granted, a lot of sleep inducing moves don't have very high accuracy, but if they're lucky, they can make it so that you never get a chance to attack. Now it's not even that much better nowadays, but at least you can still get one attack in before you are potentially put back to sleep again. While in Generation 1 it might be that you wake up and do nothing and fall back asleep again. And speaking of falling asleep, I have not really been paying attention to what's going on screen, so did we get the card key already? I think we got the card key like 5 minutes ago and I didn't really pay any attention to it. Let me look that up for a moment. Let's see. Yes, on the 5th floor of the Silph Co building we found a card key lying around, so now we can open doors. Yeah, should have pointed that out. Oh well, I'll just show the flashback of me getting a card key even though it was 5 minutes ago. Anyway, more about Generation 1 glitches and non-glitches and just programming oversights. There's another one related to critical hits, but this one is exclusive to consecutive attacks, where, for example, Fury Swipes may hit twice, may hit 5 times. In later games, whenever you use a consecutive attack, every single attack has its own chance of scoring an individual critical hit. So attack number 1 and 2 may do normal damage, then number 3 scores a critical hit, and then number 4 just is a normal attack again. In Generation 1 it was not each individual attack. If the first one scores a critical hit, all of them are going to score a critical hit, which was especially abusable with Jolteon, who learned Spin Missile, which is a consecutive bug type attack. Pretty much the only way in Generation 1 you could reliably deal with psychic types, since obviously Jolteon has a good chance of scoring a critical hit with each Spin Missile. So I think that's all the Generation 1 bugs related to critical hits. For the next few I'm first gonna explain the move Substitute. The move Substitute is one where you sacrifice a little bit of your health to essentially replace the Pokemon that's on your field with a little puppet. You will still be able to attack your opponent after that, but the puppet on the field essentially takes all the damage that you will take otherwise until it takes too much damage and it fades away. You have to sacrifice a quarter of your health to use it, but it's good to protect yourself against attacks that would otherwise take like over half of your health, so... However, in Generation 1 Substitute has a few bugs that are more beneficial to the Pokemon not using Substitute. So if you use Substitute, those bugs are beneficial to your opponent. Oh, by the way, there's this lady in a red dress here, and if you talk to her, you take a nap in the middle of this hostage taken over building, and you will get a full heal up for all of your Pokemon. That way you don't have to go back to the Pokemon Center. But anyway, I was talking about Substitute. Because if you attack a Substitute, it will negate all kinds of extra effects that you would normally get from using that move. For example, every kind of move that would usually give you recoil damage like Takedown, you take no recoil damage at all. Which is especially funny when you try to use Explosion or Self-Destruct on a Pokemon, a move that would normally kill the user. It won't kill the user, but it will make its sprite invisible until it switches out. That's hilarious. And finally there's the move Hyper Beam, which after using it would always have to take a turn to recharge. If you break a Substitute with using Hyper Beam, you don't have to recharge at all. In fact, all of these effects are only applied when you break a Substitute using that move. So if you try to use Takedown on a Substitute and it's not strong enough to break it, then you will still take the recoil damage, only if the Substitute breaks. Same goes for Explosion or Self-Destruct, but it's kinda rare that those won't do enough damage to break the Substitute, unless it happens to be a Ghost type, which are immune to both Explosion and Self-Destruct, which is kinda weird. But immunities are carried over when using a Substitute. Same goes for status buffs, so if you really up your defense and then use a Substitute, that Substitute will also have really high defense. You may notice I'm having a really hard time pronouncing that word, Substitute. Substitute. Oh well, I'm done talking about it. Though I did mention that Hyper Beam needs a turn to recharge normally, but if you use it to break a Substitute it doesn't have to recharge. That actually goes for killing a Pokemon as well in Generation 1. So if I use Hyper Beam on something and it takes away half its health, then I will have to recharge. And then if I use it again and it will make the Pokemon faint, then I won't have to recharge. That is once again fixed in later generations because that actually is a legitimate glitch that is not supposed to happen. By the way, I was also saying something about status buffs or increasing, for example, your defense stat. I mentioned earlier that you can only increase it by 6 stages. In Generation 1, if you try to go above 6 stages, it will either reset it to -6 or it will just reset it to 0. But yeah, if you use too many status buffs, it will just completely reset it. Also not supposed to happen. In later generations, it's just that when you try to use a status buff move again, even though it's already maxed out, it will just say the move has failed. It just stays at +6 and nothing will happen to it. Let's see, what else is there? The move Roar doesn't work in trainer battles, so you can only really use it for wild battles, making it kind of useless. Let's see, what else? Oh, this one is hilarious. It's about the move Rage. In later generations, if you decide to use the move Rage over and over again, it will keep getting stronger if you get hit, and if you decide to stop using the move, that power increase that Rage gets is completely reset. However, in Generation 1, are you ready for this? This is amazing. Using Rage will also cause your overall attack stat to be increased every time you get hit, but you will not be able to stop using Rage. You're also unable to switch out, so if you use Rage once, you're gonna have to keep using it until the user faints or the battle ends. However, it gets even better. If Rage misses once, its accuracy will be reset to 1 in 256, which is a 0.3% chance it will actually hit. So unless you're the luckiest person in the world and actually manage to hit with those 0.3% chance, you will have to keep using Rage over and over again and it will just keep missing. You're basically stuck using it until the Pokemon that is using the attack runs out of HP, and it's amazingly hilariously bad. I know it's nerd humor, but when I first read about this, I could not stop laughing. I can just imagine someone being so frustrated when it has to keep using the attack and it just keeps missing and missing. It is basically Pokemon Purgatory. And there's actually another thing on the list which is also kind of Pokemon Purgatory. I talked about a struggle. When you run out of PP for all of your attacks, you will automatically use struggle, which will hurt the Pokemon but will also kill yourself. In Generation 1, struggle is technically a normal type move, meaning that ghost types are immune to it. So imagine you're somehow stuck in battle where neither of the Pokemon can hurt each other, then finally you can use struggle to just get out of it, and it doesn't work. So you're still stuck in that battle, not being able to do anything. I find it a funny oversight seeing how struggle in and of itself is supposed to be a failsafe, and then there's still a situation where not even struggle can help you, a move made for getting you out of that kind of situation. So pretty much like everything else on this list, it gets fixed in Generation 2. I notice I'm kind of running out of time, even though there were a few other glitches I wanted to mention. So, seeing how all the other ones were related to in-battle moves somehow, I'll just stick to those kind of glitches. And I only have one more of those, so I'll finish up with that. This one is related to the move Toxic, which I actually have a correction to make. Earlier I mentioned that there is, next to the normal poison status, there's also the badly poisoned status. I also said how Toxic is the only move you can inflict the badly poisoned status, which was actually wrong. There are actually a few other ways you can inflict badly poisoned. Other ways you can get badly poisoned are a double layered Toxic Spikes, it's a side effect of Poison Fang, and there's the Toxic Orb item, which will also inflict badly poisoned on a Pokemon. But those are all things introduced in later generations. In Generation 1, using Toxic is the only way to badly poison a Pokemon. And just to recap, badly poison is different from normal poison, where the damage you will take from being poisoned will increase every turn. The glitch I wanted to mention is that in Generation 1, if a Pokemon is badly poisoned, you can switch out the Pokemon and then send it back in and it will have turned into normal poison. You would still be poisoned, but it's at least a not as bad kind of poison. But there's also another glitch related to badly poisoned, and that is if a Pokemon is badly poisoned and you use Leech Seed on it, Leech Seed will actually get the same effect, where normal Leech Seed will always do the same amount of damage. When you combine it with badly poison, Leech Seed will also gain power at the end of every turn. So that can be pretty damn powerful, which actually makes me curious that I wanna try Generation 1 and pick Bulbasaur so that I can try that out. As well as pick Jolteon, so I can also abuse the critical hits a little bit. Maybe someday if I feel like it, which I probably never will. Anyway, I think all this discussion about Generation 1 moves that needed a little change. I think I filled up quite enough time through this fairly boring video. We didn't really do anything, and we're not even done with Silph Co yet. Next time we're gonna finish up Silph Co with 2 certain trainers that would take way too long if I also put them in this video. Other than that, I'm pretty much done exploring all of Silph Co. I've checked every single floor, with and without a card key, fought the trainers that I needed to fight, and I think that's about it. So I will get myself a little heal up, and then next time in part 14 we will finish off the Silph Co building for real. So I will see you when that happens.